Hello, my name is Kristen Johnston, and I'm the Chief Nursing Officer at Massive Bio. Today I'm going to discuss clinical trials and their role in treating myelofibrosis patients. What do we hope you gain from this presentation? You'll be able to recognize and describe the current challenges concerning oncology clinical trials, summarize how clinical trials drive innovation, align with clinical pathways, and promote quality patient care, increase clinical trial aptitude to advance patient understanding of clinical trials, discuss the right infrastructure to encourage clinical trial participation, identify the technology available to assist care providers in identifying patients for participation in clinical trials, and inform about the importance of clinical trials to treat myelofibrosis. So, what are clinical trials? According to the NCI, clinical trials are research studies that involve people. Through clinical trials, doctors find new ways to improve treatment and the quality of life for patients with disease. Trials are available for all stages of cancer. It is a myth that they are only for people who have advanced cancer that is not responding to treatment. There are 4 phases to a clinical trial. Phase 1 tests the drug or combination of drugs for safety and side effects, as well as determines the best dose in healthy individuals. Phase 2 tests a larger group for side effects and efficacy. Phase 3 tests for long-term effectiveness and compares the drug or drugs with other medications on a new and wider subset of patients. If the drug or combination of drugs makes it here, then the treatment can be determined effective and safe for public use and in turn receives FDA approval. In phase 4, scientists and researchers will continue to test for effectiveness and safety, and if something unfavorable comes up, the drug can still be taken off the market. Next, we will discuss the impact clinical trials can have. This graph is showing the univariate and multivariable hazard ratios for overall survival by study. It's organized in descending order of the average 2-year overall survival. In the univariate analysis, 18% of good prognosis studies and 90% of poor prognosis studies showed evidence of a survival benefit for clinical trial patients. In the multivariate analysis, 9 out of 10 studies for patients with a poor prognosis showed evidence of a survival benefit for clinical trial patients. So what is the average of clinical trial participation in academic and community practices? The average rate of patients actually enrolled to a clinical trial in community centers is only 6.3%, with 59.9% of centers not having available trials options. 15.7% of patients being ineligible for a trial they screen for, and 17.9% of patients not enrolled for one reason or another. The average rate of patients enrolled to a clinical trial in an academic center is 14.8%, which is slightly better, but still not good enough. Studies at academic and community treatment sites have quantified barriers preventing patient enrollment in clinical trials, and it shows that most patients will not have the opportunity to enroll in a clinical trial. What are the barriers of clinical trials to patients? First, patients can play an active role in their own healthcare and make their own decisions while advocating for themselves. Patients can also gain access to new and effective treatments before they are approved and made available. Clinical trials can increase the options that are available to patients when all standard options have failed. Patients can receive medical care from experts in their cancer, as well as a closer, watchful eye from the whole medical staff. Finally, patients can help others by contributing to the advancement of medical knowledge. Now, the patient journey before consent consists of a bunch of available data and research via Google, advocacy groups, databases such as clinicaltrials.gov and clinical trial matching companies, followed by a discussion with the research staff, an appointment at the site, and insurance coordination, which can all leave patients overwhelmed and nervous. After the patient consents, they will sign consent for the study after all of their questions are answered by the physician and other clinical staff. They will then screen for the study to ensure their eligibility. Then they will be assigned a treatment group or an arm, if applicable for that particular study. The patients will then follow the protocol of the study to ensure safety while having routine check-ins with the provider and other members of the study team. Many patients are nervous about enrolling in trials and are asking themselves, am I going to be a guinea pig? Can I afford going to a trial? Do I need to travel to go to a clinical trial? Can I enroll to a clinical trial even if my physician doesn't know about clinical trials? Now let's discuss the benefits of clinical trials to providers. You can be top advocates for patient participation. Clinical trials may offer ideal alternative solutions for patients. Patients expect their providers to be experts on the subject. Providers rely on the knowledge gained from clinical research. Providers can improve their relationships with their patients by offering additional treatment options. Some providers find themselves asking questions as well, like how do I find the best clinical trial for my patient during my busy clinic? Do I always have to refer the patient to another facility? Is it too difficult to run a clinical trial at my own hospital? I don't have enough time and resources. Do pharmaceutical companies pay for clinical trials and how much? Am I going to lose the patient if I refer out? So really, why we're talking today is to help raise awareness of the importance of clinical trials. Several studies have shown that awareness of clinical trials can change patients' attitude toward clinical trials, enrollment to a trial, as well as awareness of the benefits that participation in a clinical trial can provide. It has been shown that 85% of patients were either unaware or unsure that participation in a clinical trial was an option at the time of diagnosis. 75% of these patients said that they would have been willing to enroll had they known it was possible. Focus groups find that many patients lack familiarity with clinical trials and are unaware of opportunities for participation by healthy volunteers. They generally express negative attitudes about participation. These attitudes significantly changed after learning more about clinical trials. Just a reminder, the faster a clinical trial enrolls patients, the faster treatment advances and improvements in outcome can be made. Therefore, the fewer barriers to participation will allow trials to be completed quicker and results to then be reported more quickly. Increased patient accrual leads to newer treatment options more quickly. The opportunity for patients to participate in their care choices can potentially increase trial enrollment. Next, we will discuss a few important facts about myelofibrosis. Myelofibrosis is a rare bone marrow cancer that is related to a group of blood cancers known as myeloproliferative neoplasms, or MPNs, in which bone marrow cells that produce the blood cells develop and function abnormally. Primary myelofibrosis is a type of chronic leukemia that can either occur on its own or as a result of another bone marrow disorder. Other MPNs that can progress to myelofibrosis include polycythemia vera and essential thrombocythemia. Myelofibrosis is usually very slow growing, and many people can live symptom-free for years before requiring treatment. However, frequent monitoring is recommended. When an unknown gene mutation occurs in blood stem cells, myelofibrosis develops. Between 50 and 60% of people with myelofibrosis have a JAK2 gene mutation. Some signs and symptoms of myelofibrosis can include anemia, enlarged spleen, neutropenia, enlarged liver, weight loss, fevers, night sweats, and bone or joint pain. Now that we know about myelofibrosis, let's discuss the treatment used for myelofibrosis. The goal of treatment for most patients with myelofibrosis is symptom relief and reduction of complication risk. Treatment for myelofibrosis can include blood transfusions, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, removal of the spleen, drugs to treat anemia, an allogeneic stem cell transplant, or clinical trials. Ruxolitinib, or Jakafi, is a type of chemotherapy and the first drug approved by the FDA for treatment of myelofibrosis. This drug has been shown to reduce myelofibrosis-related symptoms and control spleen enlargement. Allogeneic stem cell transplantation is the only potential cure for myelofibrosis. Many things are taken into consideration prior to transplant, such as age, the course of each patient's disease, and other health problems because of the considerable risk for life-threatening side effects. Clinical trials also play a vital role in treating myelofibrosis and finding new and maybe even improved drugs for better outcome. Clinical trial enrollment is especially important for those with myelofibrosis due to the lack of approved treatment options for this disease type. The JAK2 mutation is one of several gene mutations believed to be involved in the development of myelofibrosis. Since the discovery of the JAK2 gene mutation in 2005, which is found in approximately 50 to 60% of people with myelofibrosis, several clinical trials utilizing JAK2 or JAK1/2 inhibitors for the treatment of myelofibrosis have been studied. Ruxolitinib is an approved drug that targets JAK2 and other associated mutations. It was studied vigorously in clinical trials before being approved for the treatment of myelofibrosis. Fedratinib is an oral JAK2 inhibitor that was studied in clinical trials and recently approved for treatment of MPN-associated myelofibrosis. There are currently combinations of drugs, including several JAK inhibitors and other pathway inhibitors, being evaluated in clinical trials. Some of the classes of drugs and other novel therapies currently being studied in clinical trials include other JAK inhibitors, HDAC inhibitors, and immunomodulatory drugs. By enrolling in a clinical trial for myelofibrosis, patients can have an increased chance of survival as well as early access to new and improved drugs to treat their myelofibrosis. We encourage patients, caregivers, medical professionals, and anyone else to contact Massive Bio to learn more about myelofibrosis clinical trials. We can quickly access your eligibility and facilitate enrollment to take some of the stress away from you. Please feel free to reach out anytime with questions or inquiries at kjohnston@massivebio.com.